What if I told you that time, the thing you feel passing every second of your life, may not actually flow at a constant speed? Most people assume time is like a river. It flows smoothly, one second after another, and nothing can change that pace. Your watch ticks, the clock on the wall moves forward, and everything seems predictable. But at the deepest level of reality, the quantum level, scientists are discovering something very surprising. Time doesn't behave the way we think it does. In fact, recent experiments suggest that the speed of time at the quantum level can change depending on the structure of matter itself. In other words, time can stretch, compress, and unfold differently depending on what's happening inside atoms and electrons. Now that sounds like science fiction, but it's not. Physicists have recently measured quantum events lasting only attoseconds, billionths of a second, and found that these events don't occur instantly. Their duration actually depends on the atomic structure of the material involved. Let me say that again because it's important. The structure of matter can control the speed at which time unfolds inside quantum events, and that discovery connects to a deeper idea that fascinated one of the greatest physicists who ever lived, Richard Feynman. Feynman spent his career explaining that the universe is not a smooth mechanical machine. Instead, it's a probabilistic quantum world where reality emerges from tiny interactions between particles. In other words, time itself may not be fundamental. It may emerge from how quantum systems interact, exchange energy, and exchange information. Now you might be wondering, why should this matter to you? Because the same physics that governs electrons and atoms also governs your brain, your metabolism, your aging, and every chemical reaction happening in your body right now. Your body runs on billions of molecular clocks. Hormones pulse in rhythms. Cells divide on schedules. Mitochondria generate energy in timed cycles. Life itself is essentially a collection of biological clocks running inside quantum chemistry. And if time behaves differently at the quantum level, it changes how we understand everything from aging and energy to the fundamental nature of reality. So today I want to walk you through something fascinating. We're going to explore what scientists are discovering about the speed of time, how quantum physics explains it, what Richard Feynman predicted decades ago, and how this strange discovery helps us understand the deeper rhythms that control both the universe and the human body. And by the end of this talk, you'll see time in a way you probably never have before. If you enjoy learning about the science behind how reality actually works, consider subscribing. I share content like this every day to help make complex science understandable and practical. Now, before we dive deeper, let's outline the 6 key insights we're going to explore. Before we go deeper, let's step back and outline the 6 key insights that will guide this entire discussion. Think of these like 6 drawings on a whiteboard. Each one reveals a piece of the puzzle explaining how time behaves at the quantum level and why scientists are now questioning whether time is truly constant. Because when you understand these 6 ideas, something interesting happens. You begin to see that time might not be a universal ticking clock. Instead, it may be something that emerges from energy, motion, and information interacting at the smallest scales of reality. Here are the 6 key insights. First, time may not be fundamental. It may emerge from change. For centuries, physicists treated time as a basic ingredient of the universe. But many modern theories suggest something different. Time may actually arise from interactions between particles, much like temperature emerges from the motion of molecules. In other words, if nothing changed in the universe, time would have no meaning at all. Second, quantum events take measurable time to occur. For a long time, scientists believed some quantum transitions were instantaneous. But with new technologies capable of measuring attoseconds, that's 1/quintillionth of a second, researchers discovered something surprising. Electrons do not jump instantly between states. The process unfolds over a tiny but measurable duration. Third, the structure of matter influences how fast these quantum processes occur. Recent experiments show that the internal structure of atoms can slightly change the timing of quantum events. The same electron transition may take longer in one material than another. That means the microscopic structure of reality can influence the local speed of time for that process. Fourth, energy and information flow may define the arrow of time. Why does time move forward instead of backward? Many physicists believe the answer lies in entropy, the spreading of energy and information. At the quantum level, interactions constantly increase disorder, creating the directional flow we experience as time. Fifth, Richard Feynman predicted that quantum interactions define how reality unfolds. Feynman's famous sum over histories idea suggests particles explore many possible paths before one outcome becomes reality. In that sense, time may be the result of probabilities collapsing into events. Sixth, biological systems, including the human body, depend on precise timing at the molecular level. Your metabolism, your hormones, your energy production all rely on chemical reactions happening at incredibly precise speeds. If those reaction timings shift, it can influence everything from cellular repair to aging. So the question becomes very interesting. If the timing of quantum events depends on energy and structure, then the rhythms that govern life, metabolism, circadian cycles, cellular repair may ultimately be rooted in the same physics, and that gives us a powerful perspective. Because when we understand how timing works at the smallest level of reality, we begin to understand why biological timing, sleep cycles, metabolic rhythms, hormone pulses matters so much for human health. Now let's start with the first key insight, the idea that time itself may not actually exist the way we think it does, and this is where things get fascinating. Let's start with the first big idea. Time may not actually be a fundamental ingredient of the universe. Now that sounds strange, because every part of your life seems tied to time. Your watch measures it, your phone counts it, your body feels it when you wake up in the morning or when you feel tired at night. But from a physics perspective, something interesting appears when we go deeper. Time may not exist on its own. Instead, time may emerge from change. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine you're sitting in a completely dark room with absolutely nothing moving. No light, no sound, no motion, no change of temperature, nothing. Could you tell whether 1 second passed or 10 minutes? You couldn't. Without change, time becomes impossible to measure. This idea is important because many modern physicists believe time is not a background stage where events happen, it's actually a consequence of events happening. In other words, change creates time. Now this connects directly to the quantum world. At the quantum level, reality is constantly changing. Electrons move, particles interact, energy shifts from one state to another. And each of these interactions creates a tiny sequence of events. Those sequences form what we perceive as time. Richard Feynman described quantum behavior using a concept often called the sum over histories. According to this idea, particles don't move along a single path. Instead, they explore many possible paths, and the probability of those paths determines what actually happens. So instead of a smooth clock ticking, reality behaves more like a vast set of probabilities constantly resolving into outcomes. And every time one of those probabilities collapses into a real event, you get something important. You get a moment in time. Now here's where it gets fascinating. When scientists recently began measuring extremely fast quantum events occurring in attoseconds, they discovered that these transitions actually take measurable time to unfold. In other words, even the smallest quantum processes have a duration, not instant, not timeless. They take time to happen. And that means time itself may be tied directly to how energy moves between quantum states. Now you might be wondering why this matters outside of physics. Because the same principle appears inside your body. Every biological process you rely on, metabolism, hormone release, cellular repair, is driven by chemical reactions occurring at specific speeds. For example, your mitochondria generate energy through electron transfers. Your liver processes nutrients through timed enzymatic reactions. Your brain signals neurons through electrical pulses. All of these processes depend on precise molecular timing. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Your health is essentially a network of biological clocks running chemical reactions at the right speed. If those reaction speeds change because of inflammation, nutrient deficiency, sleep disruption, or metabolic stress, the timing of your body's systems begins to drift. That's when people start experiencing fatigue, brain fog, weight gain, and accelerated aging. So even though we're discussing quantum physics, the principle is surprisingly practical. Timing matters. And if this explanation is helping you see the deeper science behind how reality works, consider subscribing. I share explanations like this every day to make complex science understandable and useful. Now that we understand how change creates time, the next insight becomes even more surprising. Scientists have discovered that quantum events themselves have measurable durations, and those durations depend on the structure of matter. And that discovery is changing how physicists think about the flow of time itself. Now let's move to the second insight, and this is where the story becomes experimentally real. For a long time, physicists believed that certain quantum events happened instantly. An electron jumps from one energy level to another, and the assumption was that the jump had no duration at all. One moment it's here, the next moment it's there. No measurable time in between. But science has a habit of surprising us once our instruments become precise enough. In the past 2 decades, physicists developed tools capable of measuring time on an almost unimaginable scale called attoseconds. An attosecond is 1/quintillionth of a second. To give you a sense of scale, there are more attoseconds in 1 second than there are seconds in the age of the universe. With lasers that fire pulses this short, scientists can now observe electrons moving inside atoms in real time, and what they discovered changed something fundamental. Electron transitions are not instantaneous. They actually unfold over a very small but measurable duration. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine watching a hummingbird with the naked eye. Its wings look like a blur. You might assume the wings instantly move from one position to another. But if you film the bird with a high-speed camera, something different appears. You suddenly see the full motion of the wings. The blur was simply a limitation of your observation. The same thing happened in quantum physics. For decades, electron transitions looked instantaneous because our instruments weren't fast enough to see the motion. But when researchers used attosecond lasers, they discovered something remarkable. Electrons take time to move between states, and that time can be measured. Now here's where it becomes even more interesting. The duration of that transition is not always identical. It can vary depending on the atomic environment the electron is in, meaning the surrounding structure of matter slightly influences the timing of the event. So instead of a perfectly universal tick, quantum events behave more like tiny processes with their own internal clocks. This realization changes how physicists think about time. It suggests that time may not simply flow uniformly through the universe like a river. Instead, time may be deeply connected to how energy moves through physical systems, and the moment you think about it that way, something fascinating appears. Because this idea is not just true for electrons, it's also true for life. Inside your body right now, trillions of chemical reactions are occurring every second. Enzymes move electrons, molecules change states, energy flows through metabolic pathways, and every one of those reactions has a specific speed. Too slow, and the system loses efficiency. Too fast, and instability appears. Your metabolism works best when those reaction speeds stay in balance. This is why sleep cycles, circadian rhythms, and metabolic timing matter so much. Your body isn't just a collection of chemicals, it's a timing system built from chemistry, and once you understand that timing is fundamental to both physics and biology, the next question becomes even deeper. If quantum processes take time to occur, what determines the direction that time moves? Why does time move forward instead of backward? That question leads us to the next key insight, the role of energy flow and entropy in creating the arrow of time. Now we arrive at the third insight, and this is one of the deepest questions in physics. Why does time move forward? You never experience time running backward. You don't see broken glasses jump off the floor and reassemble themselves. You don't see smoke returning to a candle. Instead, everything moves in one direction, from order toward disorder. Physicists call this principle the second law of thermodynamics, one of the most reliable laws in all of science. And the key idea behind it is something called entropy. Entropy is simply a measure of how energy spreads out. Let me explain this with a simple whiteboard analogy. Imagine you drop a drop of ink into a glass of water. At first, the ink is concentrated in one place, but slowly it spreads throughout the water until the entire glass becomes lightly colored. The energy and molecules disperse. They move from organized to disorganized. And once that mixing happens, it almost never reverses itself. This spreading of energy is what gives the universe its arrow of time. Time moves forward because energy tends to spread out, not concentrate. Now here's where the quantum world becomes fascinating. At the smallest scales, the laws of physics themselves are actually mostly reversible. If you run the equations of quantum mechanics backward, they still work. But once you have large systems with trillions of particles interacting like a star, a planet, or the human body, the probability of reversing those processes becomes essentially zero. And that statistical imbalance creates the forward direction of time we experience. Now let's connect this idea to something practical inside your own biology. Your body is constantly fighting entropy. Every cell works continuously to maintain structure, order, and function. Your mitochondria produce energy in the form of ATP. Your liver regulates nutrients. Your brain organizes electrical signals. All of these systems require energy to maintain order. Without energy, entropy wins. Cells break down. Proteins misfold. Metabolism slows. Aging accelerates. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Health is essentially your body's ability to manage entropy efficiently. When your metabolism is strong, your cells produce energy efficiently. That energy allows your body to repair tissues, regulate hormones, and maintain stable biological rhythms. But when metabolism becomes disrupted through chronic stress, poor sleep, excessive sugar intake, or nutrient deficiencies, the system begins losing that balance. Energy production drops, repair processes slow, inflammation rises, and the body begins to drift toward disorder faster than it should. In other words, biological aging can be understood partly as the gradual loss of the body's ability to resist entropy. Now here's the encouraging part. There are practical ways to support the systems that maintain order in your body. Simple interventions like prioritizing deep sleep to restore mitochondrial energy production, stabilizing blood sugar to reduce metabolic stress, ensuring adequate nutrients like magnesium, B vitamins, and omega-3 fats, allowing periods of fasting so cells can repair damaged proteins. These strategies help your cells maintain efficient energy flow, and when energy flows properly, the biological clocks inside your body stay synchronized. So even though we're talking about physics, the lesson is surprisingly practical. Time moves forward because energy spreads out. Your job, biologically speaking, is to manage energy wisely so your body can maintain order for as long as possible. Now this leads directly to the next insight, one that Richard Feynman himself helped make famous, the idea that particles don't follow a single path through time. Instead, they explore many possible paths at once before reality chooses one. And this strange idea changes how we think about how time actually unfolds. Now let's move to the fourth insight, one of the most fascinating ideas Richard Feynman ever introduced. Feynman proposed something called the sum over histories. At first, this idea sounds almost impossible, but once you see the logic, it becomes one of the most elegant explanations of how reality unfolds. Let me explain this with a simple picture. Imagine you throw a ball across a field. In everyday life, the ball follows one clear path, a smooth arc from your hand to the ground. But according to quantum mechanics, particles don't behave that way. An electron traveling from point A to point B doesn't choose just one path. Instead, it explores every possible path simultaneously. Some paths are straight, some paths curve, some paths loop around, some paths zigzag wildly. All of these possibilities exist as probabilities. Then nature performs a kind of mathematical calculation, adding up all those possible histories, and the most probable outcome becomes the event we observe. That's what Feynman meant by the sum over histories. Reality is not just a sequence of events unfolding along a single timeline. It's a probability landscape constantly collapsing into actual outcomes. Now here's where this connects back to time. If particles explore multiple possible histories, then the future is not fixed. Instead, the present moment is where probabilities collapse into reality. Time, in this sense, becomes the process by which possibilities turn into events. Each moment is a resolution of probabilities. Now let's pause and connect this idea to something much closer to home, your own biology. Inside your body, billions of decisions are happening every second. Cells choose whether to repair damage or initiate inflammation. Hormones signal tissues to store energy or burn it. Genes turn on or off depending on the environment they detect. Your body is constantly selecting outcomes from many possible biological pathways. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Your biology is not fixed. It's probabilistic and adaptive. The signals you send your body through food, sleep, stress, and activity influence which biological pathways become dominant. For example, when insulin levels stay elevated for long periods, your metabolism shifts toward fat storage pathways. When insulin falls and energy demand rises, the body activates fat-burning pathways. The environment you create determines which metabolic path becomes reality. This is why metabolic health is not just about calories. It's about signals and probabilities inside your cells. Your daily habits shape the biochemical environment that determines which processes dominate, and that means small, consistent changes can dramatically influence long-term outcomes. Simple strategies like reducing ultra-processed carbohydrates, creating stable meal timing, prioritizing protein and micronutrients, getting consistent sleep cycles, these signals tell your metabolism which pathways to favor. In other words, your body constantly chooses between possible metabolic futures, and your lifestyle determines which one becomes reality. If this explanation is helping you see how physics and biology connect in surprising ways, consider subscribing. I share content like this every day to help make complex science understandable and useful. Now, the next insight takes this conversation somewhere even more interesting. Because if quantum timing shapes the behavior of matter, and biological timing shapes the behavior of cells, then the rhythms of life itself may ultimately be connected to timing at the quantum level. And that brings us to the next idea: how biological clocks depend on molecular timing. Now let's move to the fifth insight, and this is where physics quietly connects to biology in a very practical way. Your body is built on clocks, not just one clock, thousands of them. Scientists call them biological clocks, and they operate at many levels inside your body. There's the circadian clock in your brain that regulates sleep and wake cycles. There are metabolic clocks in your liver that determine how nutrients are processed. There are cellular clocks that control DNA repair, hormone release, and mitochondrial energy production. And every one of these clocks ultimately depends on chemical reactions occurring at very precise speeds. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine a large orchestra performing a symphony. Each musician must play their notes at the correct moment. If the violin section speeds up while the drums slow down, the entire performance becomes chaotic. Your body works exactly the same way. Your metabolism is essentially an orchestra of biochemical reactions, and timing is everything. For example, your circadian rhythm is controlled by a group of genes, often called the clock genes. These genes turn on and off in a precise 24-hour cycle, creating rhythmic patterns in hormone production, body temperature, and energy metabolism. Research in chronobiology shows that these cycles influence everything from glucose regulation to fat burning. Studies from institutions like the National Institutes of Health and multiple metabolic labs have shown that insulin sensitivity is higher earlier in the day and tends to decrease late at night. This means your body processes carbohydrates more efficiently earlier in the day compared to late evening. In other words, timing affects metabolism. Here's what's really going on inside your body. When your biological clocks are synchronized, metabolic reactions occur efficiently. Hormones rise and fall at the right times. Cells repair damage during sleep. Energy production stays stable. But when those clocks become disrupted, the timing of those reactions begins to drift. This happens with chronic sleep deprivation, irregular meal timing, late-night light exposure, excess stress hormones like cortisol. Over time, these disruptions can affect metabolism, inflammation, and even aging. Now here's the encouraging part. You can strengthen your biological timing system with surprisingly simple strategies. First, anchor your circadian rhythm with morning light exposure. Getting sunlight within the first hour after waking helps regulate the brain's master clock. Second, create consistent meal timing. Eating meals at roughly the same time each day helps synchronize metabolic pathways in the liver and pancreas. Third, protect sleep timing. Aim for consistent sleep and wake times, because deep sleep is when many repair processes occur. Fourth, consider periods of overnight fasting, often around 12-14 hours. This gives cells time to repair proteins and clear metabolic waste through processes like autophagy. If this discussion is helping you connect science with practical health strategies, consider subscribing. I share videos like this every day to help you understand how your body actually works. Because once you understand that your biology runs on timing, you start realizing something important. Your daily habits are constantly adjusting the internal clocks that control your energy, metabolism, and long-term health. And that leads to the final insight. If timing governs both physics and biology, what does this mean for aging, longevity, and the future of science? Now we arrive at the sixth and final insight, and this one connects everything we've discussed to one of the biggest questions in science: what actually controls aging? Because when scientists study aging at the cellular level, they often find the same pattern appearing again and again. It's not just damage that accumulates, it's timing that slowly drifts out of synchronization. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine a city where every traffic light is perfectly synchronized. Cars move smoothly, traffic flows efficiently, and energy is used optimally. But if those traffic lights slowly lose synchronization, something different happens. Cars begin stopping unnecessarily, congestion appears, fuel is wasted, the entire system becomes inefficient. Your body behaves in a very similar way. When you're young, the biological clocks controlling your cells are highly synchronized. Hormones pulse at predictable times. Mitochondria generate energy efficiently. Cells repair DNA damage during deep sleep. Inflammation rises and falls in controlled cycles. Everything operates in rhythm. But as we age, those rhythms begin to drift. Circadian cycles weaken. Hormone timing changes, cellular repair mechanisms slow down, energy production becomes less efficient. Scientists studying aging now believe that loss of biological timing precision is one of the key drivers of aging itself. In other words, aging may partly be a breakdown of the body's internal timing systems, and this is where the connection to quantum physics becomes surprisingly elegant. At the smallest level of reality, time is defined by how energy moves between states. Inside your cells, metabolism is also defined by how energy moves through chemical reactions. So the same principle appears again. Energy flow determines timing, and timing determines function. When energy production remains strong, when mitochondria efficiently convert nutrients into ATP, the cellular clocks that control repair, detoxification, and regeneration remain more synchronized. But when energy production declines, those systems begin losing coordination. This is why many longevity researchers focus heavily on improving mitochondrial health. Strategies like strength training to stimulate mitochondrial growth, periodic fasting to activate cellular repair pathways, nutrient-dense diets rich in minerals and antioxidants, protecting sleep to restore hormonal cycles. These habits all support efficient cellular energy flow, and when energy flows well, the biological clocks that govern your cells stay more aligned. Now here's the powerful takeaway. Longevity may not just be about avoiding damage. It may be about maintaining the timing of biological processes for as long as possible. In other words, health and longevity depend on keeping your internal systems synchronized and efficient. And this brings us to the final lesson of today's discussion. From quantum physics to human biology, the same principle appears again and again. Life depends on timing. And the better we understand that timing, the better we can support the systems that keep us healthy. So let's step back and look at what we've uncovered. Scientists studying the quantum world are discovering something remarkable. Time may not simply be a universal clock ticking in the background of the universe. Instead, time may emerge from how energy moves and how events unfold at the smallest levels of reality. We explored 6 key insights. First, time may arise from change itself, not from an independent cosmic clock. Second, quantum events like electron transitions actually take measurable time, often on the scale of attoseconds. Third, the direction of time, the arrow of time, emerges from entropy, the natural spreading of energy. Fourth, Richard Feynman's idea of the sum over histories shows that reality unfolds through probabilities collapsing into events. Fifth, biological systems, including the human body, operate through precise molecular timing systems that control metabolism, hormones, and repair. And sixth, aging may partly result from the gradual loss of synchronization in these biological clocks. Now here's the practical takeaway. Your body is constantly managing energy and timing. When energy production is strong and rhythms stay aligned, your cells function efficiently, metabolism stays balanced, repair processes work properly. But when sleep, nutrition, stress, and lifestyle disrupt those rhythms, the internal clocks that keep your body synchronized begin to drift, and over time that drift influences energy levels, metabolic health, and aging itself. The encouraging news is that many of the most powerful strategies for improving health are surprisingly simple. Consistent sleep cycles, regular meal timing, nutrient-dense foods, movement and resistance training, periods of metabolic rest through fasting. These habits help restore the natural rhythms that keep your biology functioning smoothly. So here's a simple challenge. Choose just one rhythm in your life to improve today. Your sleep schedule, your meal timing, or your daily movement. Track how your energy responds over the next week. Because when you support the timing systems inside your body, you're working with the same principles that govern physics itself. And if this video added value, like the video and subscribe to join others who are learning how to optimize their health naturally through science. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.